Good afternoon, everyone, and I hope you're having a great time at the ETLHE 2018. I'm very honored to moderate a session that's really close to my heart. The topic is really close to my heart, which is digital transformation in higher education. Let me first start by welcoming my guests here. I have Dr. Nadia Sheikh. Dean Sheikh is the first. She has been appointed as the first female dean for the founding faculty at AUB, the Faculty of Arts and Sciences. Dean Sheikh is a historian with a focus on the Abbasis and Byzantine era, and with the mainly research focus on women and gender. Besides being a professor and a researcher, Dean Sheikh has been appointed as the previously appointed as director for the Center of Arabic and Middle Eastern Studies, and chair for the History and Archaeology Department. So please help me welcome Dean Sheikh. I also have Dr. Steve Harvey. Dr. Harvey is currently the dean for the Olayan School of Business, the School of Business at AUB. Dean Harvey is a very well-established scholar in management and human resources. He has recently started a transformation at OSB. By the way, he is very well known for leading innovative programs at higher education institutes. So he's basically an entrepreneur inside the institution, or what we call intrapreneur. He's recently started the transformation at the OSB, which I'm pretty much sure that almost everyone in this room have noticed the change that's been happening at OSB recently. Please help me welcome Dean Harvey. And I also have my boss in this panel, Dr. Yusuf Asfour. He's the Chief Information Officer at AUB. He practically signs my paycheck. So I really have to be very, very careful about what I'm saying here. Please bear with me.
I have one correction. He's my boss.
Dr. Asfour comes with 30 years of experience in IT. Again, I'm sorry I'm exposing your age, but I got his permission to do that. He basically has helped several institutions in leading their digital transformation and delivery of a lot of products and services. Dr. Asfour was born at AUB, and he played at AUB, and he studied at AUB, and he's now the CIO at AUB. Please help me welcome Dr. Asfour. So, moving on to our topic. Basically, the way people my age imagine classrooms in higher education is a room where students are sitting in front of a blackboard, or at my age, at my days, it was a green board, and the professor writing a lot of kind of gibberish equations, and maybe less than 5 students nodding their heads, and the rest are half asleep. I mean, it wasn't that bad, but come on, who from the audience does also share this kind of idea with me, right? Okay, so today's students are exceptionally well versed in technology, and it has mainly shaped their life. And their expectation is that the same technology experience that they get from the commercial products, they need to get it also inside the classrooms, right? The way I imagine my 5-year-old daughter sitting in a classroom is basically, I think and I hope, it's not a classroom with only one board. It would be students sitting in groups, some of them virtually joining, and they're studying in groups, everyone or every group at their own pace. So some people are studying different material than others, or faster or slower than others, depending on the topic they're studying. And most of them are using their handheld devices. Some of them are using VR headsets. Who was in the session of the VR yesterday? So I do expect that our children, or at least people who are, let's say, 10 years far from being at the universities, would be using that for education. And everyone is engaged. The professor is there mainly to facilitate the teaching and learning, and not to control what the students are learning. And contrary to what many faculty members today think, that introducing technology into teaching, and mainly online teaching, would reduce the engagement of students. Many people think that the reduction of the face-to-face or the in-classroom time would actually reduce the engagement of the students, but that's not true. Technology, if properly used, can increase the engagement of the students. Dean Sheikh, from your perspective, can you describe what embracing e-learning at the UB can mean to students?
Thank you.
I think it's on.
So the idea, no, it's not on. On.
Check that for you.
Hello? Oh, yes, yes.
There you go.
Okay. So digital learning will help in providing accessible, flexible, personalized educational experience to the students. And the students will have access to information on their own time, at their own pace. I mean, these are, I think, some of the adjectives that one can use to describe what embracing e-learning at AUB in our classrooms for our students, because some of them would be outside the classrooms, of course, for our students. We are increasingly having a more diverse student population. We are certainly also increasing in numbers. Actually, it's scaring me how quickly we are increasing in numbers, and they keep on telling them we should stop increasing for now. And of course, the students themselves, I mean, the new generation of students are themselves very knowledgeable and very keen to use technology. This is their native language, so to speak. They feel comfortable in it, much more comfortable than we are.
Welcome to Lebanon.
And so, you know, introducing some tools might actually get them much more engaged. Not only in accessing the material, but hopefully also in maybe constructing, you know, sort of being partners, you know, minor partners for sure, in, you know, constructing some of the materials for the courses, or adding to it, or modifying it, etc. So, yes.
Yeah, it's very interesting that you also mentioned the subject of accessibility of learning material to students. Especially that using technology, accessibility can become even much better for students with special needs. But that's not our topic, but I mean,
frankly, I do want to comment a little bit on this, because particularly in our buildings, in the old beautiful FAS buildings around the Oval, we have major accessibility problems for students. They can get into the offices, they can get into some of the classrooms in IC, most of them they can get into my office, because I'm on the 3rd floor of Jessup Hall and there is no elevator.
Without elevator, yeah.
And so actually, you know, making that, you know, that for sure actually is a priority as well, you know, to...
Yeah. Dean Harvey, can I take your perspective on that?
Can you hear me? Hello? Okay. I think digitalization of education provides an opportunity to rethink how we do education in all circumstances in higher education. And by digital, we can mean everything, you know, I take it as meaning everything from the virtual to the printed word that we've often used in academia. The notion of reconfiguring is that we've set up an image of what it means to have an education that is based on course hours, about being in a certain place at a certain time, and about giving a certain amount of instruction, and that there's a certain format that needs to be followed. In my view, the biggest impact of digitalization is creating a freedom of rethinking how we can, in fact, translate the learning experience into a new, transformed way of existence. I think it allows us to think about time, people, and places in completely different ways. And if you think about it, many parts of our lives have been transformed, and education is going to be no less. Just using a basic example of perhaps our TV watching behavior as adults over the years are very different now than they were before. Perhaps before we used to watch an episode every week, the new episode would appear, and we would wait for the next week for that episode to appear. But Netflix, through digitalization, has completely changed that experience. It has created a new time horizon. We suck it up in an entire series, sometimes within a weekend, or over a certain shorter period of time. Exactly. So we as human beings have learned to appreciate how it changes the ways that we can experience our world. And I think the education is no different, okay? We have an opportunity to say that individuals who are with us are going to want to experience the world in a different way. And frankly, I think it then frees up that time, that classical time of class time, to do different things, to experience the world in various ways. So I think it's a liberating opportunity, if anything, and it's the way that we think about it at the School of Business.
Yep. Would you like to add to that?
Excuse me. I'd like to echo what Steve was saying, in the sense that my fear and excitement about digitalization is that the fear is that we end up doing what we do today online with new technology.
That's a very interesting point of view, by the way.
But I think where the value of digitalization is, it provides us with new ways to think about the way we do things and what we do and how we do them. So it provides us the freedom to think about where we teach, how we teach, should we keep on teaching the way we're teaching, and what we teach as well. Because now with the online learning, we also have access to all kinds of content that the student didn't have before. So the question then becomes, do you teach content, or do you use the online experience for other ways as well? The challenge in my mind is we have a new tool now, but it's not just, if we keep on doing what we're doing and doing digitally, we haven't done much. It provides us with a way to transform and rethink the way we teach, how we teach it, where we teach it, who we teach, and what we teach.
Yep. Very insightful.
I just want to add something as well, because actually it's a project that we are going to be moving on. We have moved on actually since last week. I mean, using also digital analytics help us with advising, and we actually are, now going to be introducing an advising tool for the students, which actually I think is a hugely important development for the students and for the advisors, for them to track, what they're doing, and for the advisor then to sit down with them and talk to them about other things, not about the kinds of courses they can or should be taking, but to talk about them about something a bit deeper, about their future, about their trajectory and the like.
Yeah, I'm probably using machine learning to predict student outcome using analytics. That's totally true. Dean Harvey, I know because I have worked with you on that, and we are actually working on that, that you are currently redesigning some of the programs to be blended, so partially online, partially face-to-face. So can you please share your faculty's vision and efforts towards the implementation of digital learning?
I think that as a first step as a faculty, what we're trying to do is make sure that everyone within our faculty is comfortable with the notion of digital learning. People will immerse themselves in it in different forms, to different degrees, at different periods of their career and over time. And by readiness, I mean it's not just the faculty, but it's also the students. And we like to assume that the students are sophisticated in their expectations, but frankly, we find that sometimes they're not as sophisticated as we would want, and in fact, sometimes faculty are much more sophisticated. So there's a lot of myths that are, first of all, we need to dispel, and we do as a faculty. But we do so by, first of all, becoming much more comfortable with the technology. So everyone is being exposed through learning experiences, through practical experiences, and bringing it into their courses. Usually the way that faculties have changed over time as we've seen them become more digital is they've picked champions within the faculty who've run with the technology, and others have followed along with it. We've done some of that, but what we've preferred to do instead is pick certain programs that would be, those people teaching in this program would have committed to being focused on the use of blended technologies in their teaching. So we've done that in our case with the Executive MBA program, which we've redesigned in a way that those individuals who have agreed to teach in this program have also agreed to use technology in its most advanced state to teach their particular courses. That will cover a certain large percentage of the faculty that will then be able to, we expect, translate their learning into other programs as well. And the change has to be bite-sized. It can't be something that is so enormous, and the way that we've treated it is that it really has to be something that's manageable, something that is not frightening, something that you will be accompanied through. And I think in all cases we've found that people are, if anything, somewhat timid but not frightened about it. They realize that we're going to be able to get through this. And the most important thing, I think, in a transformation in faculty is to give yourself the time to actually bring that transformation into place. We often have a sense of urgency when it comes to digitalization, that we will be behind the times if we don't move quickly. The question more is whether we're moving or not, but not so much how fast we're moving. Those organizations that I've talked to that are perhaps the leading organizations, at least in education and business and online learning, have pointed out that some of the things that they are considered to be leading on right now, they well realize are not helping them be competitive in 5 to 10 years from now, because the world digitally is going to be very, very different than the way that they're leading at right now, that they're going to constantly need to be adapting. So they're really not ahead, is what they're telling me. They're just right now at leading the pack. So we have to think about urgency and time in a different way, perhaps, than we've been brought to believe. It's not to say that we shouldn't be acting, but we should be acting with a certain sense of deliberation.
As on the contrary of what people might think, and based on our experience at UB blended courses, most of the blended courses are in the Faculty of Arts and Science, and namely in the English. And I know that you, Dean Sheikh, also have this plan of kind of solving the places issue by having online scheduling tool and online offering of some, let's say 30% of the face-to-face time in class. So do you consider that online education would actually help in solving space issues in classrooms?
And so my faculty is the largest, and it teaches everybody else. So we are constantly, any given semester, we are offering 1,400 sections for FAS students and outside for all the other faculties. On any given Monday, we just got the figures recently, NICE Hall receives 5,500 students on any given Monday. Wow. So of course, and I mean, finding classroom space for all of these increasing sections has become a real challenge, and that's why we're very pleased that the university is also moving on with helping us with a classroom scheduler. That would help, but again, leaning in the direction where Dr. Harvey is talking about, maybe do less classroom time and do more virtual time. I mean, I'm thinking that actually it would help so much our students not to come in every day to campus in some ways because of traffic, and I mean, there's just the bad quality time that they spend coming into AUB and then leaving AUB at 4 or 5 p.m. and that's about maybe 2 hours of. However, I do want to point that I proposed, as a part of a conversation, just the beginning of a conversation to the chairs of my departments this last Monday, the possibility of what if we, basically give our classes Tuesday, Thursday, and Monday, Wednesday. I think OSB is doing that. Yeah. And there was a lot of resistance, frankly. They are very traditional. I felt that more from the science departments and math, etc. They are into the 50-minute sections and a very, very traditional model, the model that you started your conversation with. And so we need maybe to actually restart this conversation differently, and talk about what are you proposing? Are you thinking actually of doing things differently in your classrooms? I don't think we've engaged my faculty. It's a very large faculty, and again, the humanities say, oh, we need more time. We need an hour and 15 minutes at least to get through a conversation in our classrooms. The math 201 people say 50 minutes is the most our students can actually, take.
Concentrate.
So it's always very difficult to actually, somehow, given the diversity of the disciplines in the faculty, it's very difficult to follow one model, but we are moving on in places where people are ready to move. We need to encourage more people actually to move in this direction. Yes.
Yeah, given the diversity that FAS does, and given also the size from the number that you just said, you're practically teaching 3 out of 4 students. 3 out of every 4 students at the UB. So that's very interesting way of putting that.
What I mean, just for those who don't quite understand the American model, I mean this American liberal arts model, that is every engineering or business student who comes into UB has to take, of course, English communication skills and Arabic, but also some humanities courses, some natural science courses, and all of these are offered by the Faculty of Arts and Sciences, and math courses, and actually quite a significant package of their courses is offered in my faculty.
True. University IT teams, today they need to deliver projects much faster than ever. And the demand on these is exponential. I mean, I'm seeing that. I'm sure that some of the audience have either worked previously at IT or are currently working at IT, right? Anyone here working at IT? Come on, don't be shy. I work at IT. So basically, the demand on IT services is exponentially, it's going exponential, and there are many drivers for that change. Some are business drivers, like the new technologies, HPC, cloud services, machine learning, big data, etc., etc. Dean Sheikh just mentioned a couple of those. And there is the student engagement as well. So today's students are spending their free time on their handheld devices, and they also expect to spend their learning time on the same devices. And also there's the reframing of the learning material. So people are now, technology is given the chance of moving away from traditional textbooks into online material. So again, the demand is exponentially increasing, and this is where I want to ask this question to Dr. Asfour, which is the digital transformation. It requires a lot of resources, basically both human resources and financial resources. So at AUB, how do you think you can address this specific issue, the issue of increasing the resources, given the restricted budget that all universities are facing today?
I guess I'll start by answering that question with one word. Excuse me. And that
I was
word,
expecting more than one word.
No, and that word is leverage, right? We can't do everything ourselves. So we have to figure out, as IT, in fact, as any organization, how can we do more, faster, with less? And the approach we're taking at AUB is twofold. The first fold is to transform ourselves from being the service providers that provide every single service to becoming more of service brokers, where we identify other entities, whether they're in AUB or outside, that provide those services, and then act as the integrator of those services so that we can provide them to the faculty and students. By doing that, we have exposure to a wider area of services that we can supply with fewer resources. The second part of leverage, so this way we're leveraging our partners, our other universities, as well as other providers of content and services. But the other part of leverage is partnership, where basically I hope the deans would agree that we're trying to become better partners, where we're not just servicing the departments, but we're actually co-developing with them, trying to better understand their needs from a pedagogical point of view, trying to understand their needs better from a student experience point of view, and then working together with them so that we can share resources and we're not just investing, we're co-investing together, both in terms of the services, the time, and the resources. So if I wanted to summarize, it's all about leveraging our partners by becoming service brokers instead of inventing everything ourselves, and then by being true partners with the faculties so that we can co-develop things together.
Mm-hmm. Dean Harvey, would you like to comment on that?
Could you repeat?
So basically, the thing is how IT can actually supply all this tremendous demand, both in human resources and resources needed are financial and human resources, and still IT will always, I think, have the budget restrictions that are set at the CFO level.
I think that we have to use each other's services wisely. Going to what you were saying, I think we're increasingly seeing, at least I encourage my faculty and myself to see IT as part of the solution and not the entire solution. When we look at online learning, blending learning, we automatically assume that someone out there is going to do it all for us. And I think it's really just part of the issue is the technology component. Call it the technology component, the digital component, and it's going to help fix part of the problem, or part of the change, or part of the transformation. The real transformation is in our mental architecture of how we see our programs and the delivery of those programs. IT can't be expected to deliver on that. We have to deliver on our own as faculty with that respect. And I talked about earlier, reconfiguring our thinking in terms of time, people, and places is we have to ourselves think about the educational experience in a different way and work in partnership with a variety of people, including IT, and other educational service providers to rethink how we deliver content, how we create experiences for the students, and how at the end we accomplish a certain amount of competency building in the students who work with us over time. There's all kinds of examples in higher education where that happens, and I think we have to find our way. And we have to work together and not expect that someone's going to deliver the solutions for us. And IT, I think, has been unfairly placed in the circumstance of being expected to provide solutions. And it really starts with our own mental architecture to begin with.
Yeah. Dean Sheikh, you have described the current situation at the UB, and especially at your faculty, which is practically the biggest faculty of UB, both geographically and demographically. So, given what we are saying, and given that digital transformation is coming, optimistically speaking, how would you see AUB, both from a student perspective and from learning spaces perspective? How would you see it in, let's say, 10 years from now?
I want to concur with what Dean Harvey was saying, which is that we first of all need to change the way we think about this, and I'm saying top bottom. It's not all on the faculty, but particularly the faculty members, and that would require, a certain leap, on their part, but also a lot of training. So we would need to use, ways in which we can actually train the faculty to think differently, but also to how to use, but also to use the technology. It would, of course, you would also need a lot of somehow support in classroom spaces, redesigning the classrooms into technology classrooms. Again, repair, maintenance, a lot would be still, frankly, carried on by IT. Now, there are limitations, of course, in how quickly and how effectively perhaps one can move. Developing the attitude would take a little bit of time. I just can't imagine that it will be, instantaneous or quick, because actually, I don't know that we've had a lot of progress on that in the last few years, let's say 3-4 years. I think once we moved on to sort of Moodle, I don't know that we've gone beyond that really. So I went to Moodle eventually, so but that's about it. So developing, so the faculty would have needed to have developed, the attitude and acquired the skills and knowledge to integrate digital learning in their courses. And also a reliable network, and that's a challenge because it's not in our hands. I mean, a reliable network for the country, and in that sense, in a way, I'm less optimistic. Or maybe, but one doesn't know. I mean, sometimes things do happen, and so also online degrees are not accredited by the Lebanese law, by the ministry, by the Lebanese law, and given also the slow pace of change in the public sector, again we will not have any. I'm not too keen on that personally. I would rather actually just focus on what we're doing here, and just doing it a bit differently, because it could help in a whole range of things. And again, we know the limited resources that AUB has, so providing the necessary IT infrastructure needed for the digital learning that you may actually be wanting to achieve might take some time.
Yeah, actually you're raising a very good point here, which is when you mentioned the Ministry of Higher Education not yet accrediting online courses, online education. This also brings us to the topic of the quality of online education. I've been in discussions where faculty members, they rightfully say that online education might dilute the value of a university degree. So given that AUB has its own status and the quality of education it provides, Dean Harvey, how do you think digital transformation can maintain at least the same status of the high quality degree that a university, and namely AUB, do provide, without diluting the value of the degree?
I think the broad stroke valuation of a program as effective or ineffective is probably an error of judgment on most experts' part. There's places for online learning, and there's places for classic learning, and there's places for everything in between. And depending on what the kind of learning we're talking about, it may be more or less effective. But what the data is telling us, I believe, at least from what I've seen, at least in my field, is that the completely classical approaches to learning that we've inherited from the past are not as effective as other methods of learning that we've now experimented with over the years. And by that I don't mean completely online learning, because it does have its challenges. It doesn't provide the kind of experiences and the value added that we sometimes get from human interaction in places and given the time to actually accomplish a certain amount of integration. It's not to say that it's impossible, it's just that it needs to be developed further. But that may be truer for someone who's younger and at the undergraduate level. I've talked with executives who have completely online learning experiences in some of their executive programs, and have worked with other top executives around the world in group work and what they've done, and they thought it has been a fabulous experience for them, given their time commitments and other things that they're doing. Hence my point about evaluating a type of learning broad stroke, as opposed to understanding that within certain contexts it may be very meaningful, whereas in other contexts it may not be. Having said that, I think the safest route is what we've talked about as blended learning or hybrid approaches to maximizing, leveraging the various forms of learning, digitalization, in-person, group work, and so forth, so that it matters to impact our learning experience in the places and in the forms that we would want. It's mixing and matching these things together that I think is very important. So that I think that my sense is that a completely online degree as an undergraduate or graduate program will have its challenges to be compared to a regular degree. However, the idea that you might have a completely online course within a generally classic program is probably not as much of a problem. So we really need to look at our language and purposes.
Using this tool or using this concept very wisely to apply it where it should be applicable, and adopting a hybrid model but a hybrid model would actually guarantee not diluting the value of education.
Absolutely. I think it's in the, learning is not just about content. It's about how we experience and integrate that content. Mm-hmm. And whatever method best helps us accomplish that and bring the learning from a knowledge-based to a procedural and an action-based from the learning perspective, the better advanced we are. And depending on where a person is in the context in which they're learning, the different forms of learning may more or less be applicable.
I'm sure that also Dean Sheikh might have something to say here, especially that in some of the courses, especially when there's a huge number of students, like for example, the civilization sequence courses, it's very difficult for the instructor to maintain the engagement of almost each and everyone in the audience. However, if these specific lectures were made online, the instructor will be able to do, for example, pit stops to make sure that each and every student cannot continue until they grasp the lecture that has at least the material that has been delivered online. So how again I would like to ask you the same question about how can online education guarantee or even increase the quality of education at the UB?
I mean, the example you gave is something that I already talked a little bit about. I mean, there is so much needed change in FAS, and I'm trying to move slowly because people are very resistant to change. But I attended last semester and this semester the public talk that they give in the CS course. And again, for those of you who don't know, this is the grade books course that all FAS students have to take, and a lot of other students take as well. And but basically what they do is all of them meet in this Bathish auditorium on Monday, and they listen to a public talk, and then there is, basically small section discussions for 2 extra days. I frankly felt that this doesn't need to be done in this way. That actually we're losing on one extra session, one-on-one session by the instructors by actually just putting them all in one large room. But again, so I think this is definitely one of the ways in which this could happen. I'm imagining that it could be a bit helpful also in the large classrooms for the biology courses, which have 200 and 250 students sometimes, some of the chemistry courses as well.
Courses, yeah.
A lot of these sort of pre-medical. But again, one needs somehow, a project on how to do that. Even if we do that in a particular way, I can imagine that we may actually have also lots of problems dividing those groups into smaller sections.
Oh, yeah.
Given also the space availability and everything else with it. But I did want to say that somehow thinking about engaging the students more, what Dean Harvey was also saying, it's about how they experience the content as opposed to just knowing the content. That is something that, I'm sure in some courses, the large courses, which has a lot of lecturing really, students actually end up, just being in touch with a particular way of knowing the content and not being able to engage and be more active learner as opposed to, just be passive learner.
Yeah. And they also touched base about the buy-in of the faculty members and doing that, because the faculty members, these are the champions of this transformation. Since you have the microphone, how do you think how would you deal with the faculty buy-in, and how do you think we can incentivize faculty members on actually buying in, because it's a lot of extra work on the faculty members to transform the way they teach. We used to give stipends for each faculty member who actually completes the blended training and delivers successfully a course in blended format. We're not doing that anymore. However, the demand is increasing, but we'd like to see more of that.
Frankly, considering our current system of promotion and now tenure at AUB, we do not give a lot of incentive for our faculty to invest time and effort in rethinking their teaching. In this case, of course, we're talking about digital learning, because we do not evaluate teaching in the same way as we do research. And so our faculty end up investing the most to get the best techniques for their research, but would not put the same effort in, in developing or improving or changing their techniques in teaching, because really the research is what largely determines their promotion and now, of course, tenure. So yes, we need to give more incentives somehow. Maybe, yes.
We have 2 out of 6 deans here, so that's 1/3 to start doing that.
Yeah, but the incentives could, of course, have, again, like everything else, Dr. Asfour, it's financial constraints, you know. That is, if you want to give them a financial incentive, you talk about a stipend or giving them a course buyout for producing a new type of course. All of that, I mean, these are wonderful possibilities, but we are always constrained by budget limitations.
Always. I mean, even with that, I can also imagine the extra amount of work that faculty members have to do will actually burden that. Coming from a development background, I can think of that, and I think maybe Dr. Asfour can tell us about different buy-ins or different transformations that might have happened during your technical experience, let's say development experience. I know that there has been many pit stops and many places where you really had to transform, and how maybe we can apply whatever happened back there to higher education in a certain way.
I'm not sure I understand that question, but I'll try to answer it anyway.
Okay, I'm fishing for the story of moving from scripting to...
I think one of the, before the panel, some of us here were discussing about the idea that to transform from classical teaching to digital learning, it's not just about learning new tools, but it's about how you even, as Dean Harvey was saying, it's change your mental architecture and the way you think. And the example we were explaining, or at least I don't know how many of you are programmers here, but a long time ago when you used to program, we used to use called procedural programming. And that's basically you sit down and you map out the process and you just write it step by step. Then in the 90s, a new way of programming came around, and that was called object-oriented programming. And I had built my career building procedural programming, doing things step by step. And the object-oriented programming forced us to start thinking not of the procedures, but really of what the entities are, what the objects are, and how they interact with each other. And it was like, oh my God, I have to rethink everything I'm doing. Why should I do that? It's the way you do it. But then I forced myself to do it. And it wasn't until 6 months into it or a year into it that I realized, hey, this is a different way of doing things, and it makes sense. And I think the point here is that with digital learning, it's also very similar, I think, in the sense that it's not just about using the tools or using the same way you used to do things, but using different tools to do it. But the tools allow you and force you to do things in different ways. And the transition, at least on the programming side, and I don't know on the academic side, on the teaching side, changes the way you think, changes the way you do things, and you have to go through at least a year of transition before you start seeing, oh my God, what the benefit is. And during that transition, what ends up happening, you end up using your old techniques, using new tools. So although I was using object-oriented programming tools, I was still programming in procedural ways. And
just the trap that you were talking about in the beginning of the session.
So it goes back to Dean Harvey's point, I think, in the sense that digital transformation for me is not, IT can provide the tools, but there's a change in architecture, there's a change of thinking, there's a change of methodologies that have to go through that. And that has to be driven and has to be, to some degree, forced through, and you have to stick it out to see the results at the end. I don't know if I answered the question.
Yeah, you did. Would you like to say something about that?
Sure. I agree with Dean Schick's view of the faculty challenges, of course, because of the multiple responsibilities that we give faculty, doing research, teaching, and now expecting innovations in teaching is adding. So certainly one of the things that become clear to me across different institutions in my experience in dealing with this issue is time is the biggest constant issue in most circumstances. You really do need to provide people with the time to make these changes, because research takes time and it can't be taken away from that, which is a very important thing to their promotion going forward. But teaching is also something very important, and we need to point out to faculty that it is going to be critical to their advancement that teaching is there. It's interesting that we've been talking about this transformation today as if it's about moving from A to B, and that there will never again be any other form of transformation. And I think the reality is, and we have to awaken all of ourselves to this, is that the only constant is change. And the idea is that we have to wake up to the idea that education is going to be evolving at an even quicker and faster pace, and that the only thing that is going to be true is that we will be asked to innovate regularly. So perhaps what we need to be talking about is about the innovations we continually bring into our educational experience with our students that are going to be critical and important, and not, I've made the change, I'm now okay, I can sit on this for 20 years because I'm now part of the new world. It's not going to work that way. I think we need to not let people fall into that trap of assuming, take one course with IT, you've made the change, I'm digital native now, I can go. It's not going to happen that way.
Yeah.
I'd like to not only second that, but add to it something. It's not that the only constant is change. One of the words I've heard before is that we live in an era of hyper change, where things are not only changing, but the rate of change is accelerating as well. So what used to take 20 years to change, now it'll be 10 years now, and it'll be maybe 5 years later and 3 months. So not only do we have to adapt to assume that things are going to constantly change, but we also have to be able to handle with faster change as well.
Mm. Now, since we have like 15 minutes left, I would like to jump to a very important topic, which is budgeting. But this time, I wouldn't be asking questions. I would be asking you to ask each other questions about how can, with the current structure of budgeting at universities, actually, accelerating digital transformation can be very tough. And I know that from an insider point of view from IT, because I know that the way the budget today is structured really doesn't help. So I'm wondering if you have questions for each other regarding how can we restructure the budget, or how can we restructure the budget both from allocation perspective and even maybe from the student perspective. The online learning will open up for even more students, although Dean Sheikh was saying that she wants less students, but online learning will actually get us more students and hence more revenue, and probably would need to have less fees for the students to pay since they are using less the campus resources. So would you like to?
I don't want students, given that we are not moving quickly enough towards any transformation, given that we are giving our classes in the same structure, in the same buildings, in the same classrooms. I cannot afford any new students. FAS is really beyond capacity. However, if the transformation happens quickly enough, then we don't need to be using the spaces in the same way, and then one would be more amenable to more students. But I do think that quality is of the essence. I don't like us to just grow and grow and grow and not really. I think the problem in my faculty, we grew a little bit too quickly in the last few years, and I do feel that now we need somehow to just take a pause and consolidate and try to move in certain new directions within our parameters, etc., and try to see if we can do things differently to actually increase capacity within the constraints that we already have. So somehow, I feel like the question is a bit premature.
Yeah.
I'm going to say it's premature for different reasons, but I think that's the way that we find ourselves not innovating, is thinking about budgets and thinking about how we're going to afford doing what we need to do before we've discussed what it is that we want to do and think what we need to do. I think we need to to use strategy talk here, give ourselves a blue ocean. In other words, not have any constraints of budgets, past practices, contact hours, anything, 15-week courses, anything that we've used in the past to parameterize our teaching and our learning, and remove that. And look at the experience and the outcomes and the goals that we're trying to achieve in our experience, and engineer backwards to where we are, and then budget what the cost of this would be then make more sense, because we've achieved something that we want to move towards.
Yeah, so I was asking about just one thing, and now you're taking us to modifying literally everything that we do.
Exactly, and I think it's long overdue for education to start thinking that way, because let's not kid ourselves that there are great examples out there of competitors to higher education that are doing and are claiming to be doing the same things that we are doing. And they may be small and minute at this point in time, but they are growing in numbers and they're growing in voice in terms of what they're doing and accomplishing. So many of these are offering degree programs in completely different structured systems than the ones that we have. And once that takes hold and once that thinking moves forward, we need to be prepared to think about how we might add value in a different way, but perhaps very different than what we're doing now.
Yeah.
So just to follow up, I think one of the advantages we have sometimes it's an advantage of being slow, is that we can then, instead of having gone A, B, C, D, we are already in D because of, so we are slow, we didn't do ABC, but then everybody else has, and they've learned a lot from their experiences, what works, what doesn't work, and then we can somehow almost, get somehow the gist of their experience, and maybe just, move on quick.
Leapfrog.
Yeah.
Move. Yeah.
Is what it's called?
I think so, right? Leapfrog move. Yeah.
But again, so we need somehow to learn from the successful experiences and try to follow these, so we don't need to actually waste our time experimenting, so to speak.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I have to agree with both deans in the sense that although budgets control us, I don't want to think budgets. From my experience, at least, is if we focus on the important things. What is the student's experience we're looking for? What kind of results we want to be, and then figure out how we want to do things and what we want to do. Then it's really a matter of prioritization. And with the limited resources we have, we can prioritize things the right way. An example of that would be the NREN, the National Research Network that we're building with the other universities. In Lebanon, there's very bad networks. And the universities in Lebanon have very small budgets. Yet we figured out between the universities that what's important to us is a few key services. And by focusing on those, Lebanon, which had no NREN until very recently, leapfrogged, and now is, when you go to the international forums, the rest of the world talks about Lebanon as an example of how we do that. And we did that with no money but the reason, and no resources, and the reason we were able to do it that way was because we focused on what's important, we focused on what we wanted to do, we designed it first, and then we figured out.
Regardless of the network problems.
We used actually the constraints as an advantage, and we built it. So to the point here, if we can focus, again, rethink about what is it we're trying to achieve in terms of teaching, and what in terms of student experience, it'll be hard, but we can reprioritize our budgets to make that happen.
Yeah. Okay, I really don't want to keep anyone from lunch, especially myself. So, I mean, if we can hear one or two questions from the audience.
Hi. It's not so much a question as much as I'd like to add a faculty perspective, because I teach in blended format, and I'm a faculty at AUB in the English department, and I'm also a member of Amical's Digital Pedagogy Committee. So I'm very into teaching with technology. And I really think that for a faculty member to really make the most of technology, you need to view your classroom as a living lab. Mm-hmm. What I mean by that, things evolve very quickly. The minute you go out of Moodle or any learning management system, and you're using other online platforms. Maybe you're using Hypothesis so that students can collaboratively annotate something. Maybe you're using Kahoot and Socrative and like goodness knows what else. These platforms change, and sometimes maybe one thing works well for one particular course, it does not work well for another course. Sometimes one thing was for free, and then suddenly it's subscription only, and obviously, I mean, you have questions about the privacy of students. The minute I opt for one online platform, what am I doing vis-a-vis their privacy? Is what they post there theirs? Does it become the property of that particular, platform?
That's very true.
And I think another thing is the physical space can be very constraining. Not only the board, but even having...
the size, you mean constraining, or in the design?
In the design. I mean, even like, say, simple things like having the seats bolted to the floor, which makes, okay, bring in your laptop, let's work together in groups, very challenging. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you. Questions? Ryan?
I have two questions from the virtual attendees. One of them is, what can we do to help address some of the challenges hindering progress with online learning, such as legislation, accreditation? Mm-hmm. And the second one, are there any plans to have a joint effort, to have another joint diploma, such as ProGreen, with other universities?
Okay, if I may, I will answer the first question, which is basically the legislation of what we're talking about, because we're actually researching that today as we speak, by coming up with different policies, procedures. One of the very important policies is the student identification policy, which kind of makes sure that whoever is taking the course online, whoever is being credited for the 3-credit course is the person who is actually taking the course on. So there's a lot of policies, procedures that we are working on, and we're hoping that this will, one, help us in, will answer the question, and two, it will also help us with the discussions that would have to be made with the Ministry of Higher Education so that they can accredit the courses. The second question was the joint degrees. Yeah, I mean, I'll leave it to the deans to answer that if there was plans for that. Yeah, none enough, yes.
I wouldn't say that we have one right now determined, but we're in conversations with a number of other institutions where we expect that some of these things may materialize, yes. Whether they're 4-credit type programs or certificates through regional extension programs or other types of arrangements, I think working across institutions goes with digitalization. So I think it is part of the learning experience, and I think we're able to maximize and leverage different experiences. So we're actively exploring those possibilities.
I have one question, please. First of all, thank you for sharing your insights. You mentioned a couple of times the concept of machine learning. My question is, have you in any aspect tried applying machine learning on student grades to help you predict outcomes? And if so, how helpful were they in helping you predict and tailor the content you give in the courses to your students?
We're currently, as we speak, we're piloting a project on doing exactly that. And our plans are much bigger than that, but we're experimenting there so that we can see how we can predict the behavior, not only based on grades. I mean, our pilot would be based on grades and based on stuff from the student information system. But then it will also collect a lot of different information. We're worried, of course, about the privacy of the students, because we would also like to collect information from the network usage of the students, from the location in the campus, from the time they arrive to the campus, from the time they leave the campus, how much time they're spending here. We'd also link that to their school's behavior as well. So there's a lot of dimensions here. The pilot, we shouldn't worry about all these constraints in the pilot, because the pilot is only based on the student information system, which is information that we can formulate and we can predict based on them. But our plans is to actually go the extra mile. So thank you for this question.
Any other questions? I'm Carol Lazar. I'm a professor of electrical engineering at the Lebanese University, and I'm involved in teaching and learning programs, both locally and at the EU level. As an engineer, I surely favor all ICT technologies to be enhancing our courses and our teaching and learning experience. But as a citizen, I worry about social isolation that might hinder the ultimate mission of educational institutions, which is getting our graduates to be civically engaged and have an impact on society.
Yeah.
So if this workshop was done in a video conferencing, for example, environment, how much would it have affected the impact?
Yeah, actually, this specific workshop.
That's the dilemma, I think.
Yeah.
Thank you.
This specific workshop is being also live streamed, so we do have virtual attendees, and we do have physical or face-to-face attendees. So, and I think I've heard the discussion between Dr. Asfour and Dr. Harvey just before the panel about this topic of the value of the degree is not only the knowledge that the university gives you, it's more of the competencies that you gain from the universities. And, along these come the interaction between the students, interactions with the students and the faculty members. Dean Harvey, would you like to add to that?
I think when we design these programs, we have to have a clear sense of what we're trying to achieve. And if impact and if community involvement in these type of issues are important, they should be designed into the program. And if any one thing is become clear to me is that there's a limited set of priorities that are most important in any program, and we want to maximize them anytime we design a program. It doesn't mean that every program will meet all needs, in other words, but it will certainly meet the needs we designed and wanted to design into them. So what you bring up, I think in many circumstances that's important to us and it needs to be designed into the program. In other circumstances, perhaps we figure people are getting that kind of exposure in other ways and that this particular program will not need to maximize that. But it's a conscious choice. It's something that we build into the design. The key, I think, is not to try to design every possible element into any one course and assume that they're going to create it, is to look at it as a mosaic and where are these different experiences on the conceptual map are they going to be had in the experiences that students are being delivered. But it's a very good point and one that needs to be thought about as a mosaic.
If I may add to what you were asking about, the trend I think is more, we started with face-to-face learning and moved to online learning. I think now the pendulum is beginning to move back where they are integrating the face-to-face in different ways with the online. In other words, you have study groups, students have study groups of their own. There are ways for the students to meet with the instructor face-to-face. So I think the social isolation bit is very important. And the trend is to move away from that, where you do have the students socializing, meeting in groups, studying. And for the assessment, a lot of the assessment is being done physically, on campuses.
For proctored
yes. So I think a lot of these problems have been addressed in online learning.
I think we see a lot of that, and a good example of that is the flipped classroom that we often talk about. And if anything, digitalization decreases social isolation. Sitting in a classroom listening to someone lecture to you could be an isolating experience. But sitting in a classroom where you're participating with other people, having prepared in other ways before you have arrived there, increases involvement, increases participation. So sometimes the technology, in fact, reverses some of the things we fear that it will create.
That's very true, and I know that introvert students might be even more engaged and ask more questions if they're. I'm an introvert person, and I know that I would be very much comfortable on texting a question rather than just asking it. No. Sure.
Yeah. I'd like to also pick up on a point of discussion that Dean Harvey and I were having before. Correct me if I got it right. But the interaction also doesn't just have to be classroom interaction. With digitalization, it allows us to start bringing the learning into a broader space. For example, a student who's actually working at McDonald's, right? The McDonald's experience could be his socializing aspect, and we could integrate that through the digital technology into the rest of the learning. I know that maybe that's not a very relevant example, but the idea is to... We didn't talk about, we actually talked about Burger King. No, the point is, I think that was a very simplified version. I hope I didn't get it wrong, but a simplified version of saying it allows us to take the learning experience and the interactions beyond just the classroom and integrate the non-classroom experiences, the real life, the broader life experiences into the actual teaching and pedagogy of a particular program.
Okay. I really have to end here. Thank you very much for listening, and thank you for our panelists. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just one thing, a comment here. I think we need hyper change in the incentives at the university level so that you incentivize the integration of technology with the helping the teachers. I think it's not only that we have to change, I think the systems have to change as well. Thank you, and everybody is invited to lunch. It's the first floor. تفضلوا كلكم. Thank you.